The valet had already polished the same spot on the hood twice. He did it again anyway, because the car belonged to the man inside, and a person learned to keep their hands busy when that man was due to come out. It was a black car, parked with its engine off outside Vautrin, the most expensive restaurant in Pittsburgh's Strip District. The doorman stood under the awning pretending not to watch the entrance, though everyone in the place was, in some quiet way, watching the entrance. They always were when this particular customer had a reservation. The street behind them sloped down toward the river. The lights of the far bank smeared gold across the black water, and the city went about its late autumn evening with no idea that anything was about to change. His name was Adrian Volkov, and in this city, that name was a closed door. People who knew what he did not say it out loud. People who did not know him still felt something tighten in their chest when he walked into a room. He was 38 years old, dressed in dark gray, and he moved the way a man moves when he has never in his adult life had to hurry for anyone. He had eaten alone, as he usually did. A 2-hour dinner, 3 courses, most of it left untouched. The waiters had learned long ago not to ask if anything was wrong. Nothing was ever wrong. He simply did not have much appetite anymore, and had not for a long time. He buttoned his coat and stepped toward the car, and that was when he heard the voice. "Sir." It was so quiet he almost missed it. He turned his head. A girl stood at the edge of the awning, just outside the warm reach of the restaurant's light. She could not have been older than 14. Her jacket was 2 sizes too big and gray with age. The cuffs frayed to threads. Her sneakers had been white once. There was a bruise along her jaw, yellow-green and fading, and a fresher one near her temple, half hidden by hair she had not washed in some time. The doorman moved toward her at once. "Hey, you can't be here." "Go on. It's all right," Adrian said. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. The doorman stopped. The girl did not look frightened, exactly. She looked careful. Her eyes went over him the way a person studies a frozen river before stepping onto it, testing for the part that will hold. "Sir," she said again, "can I have what you're about to throw away?" For a moment the whole scene seemed to stop. The valet looked up. The doorman frowned. A couple leaving the restaurant slowed their steps to watch. Adrian had been asked for many things in his life: money, mercy, favors that came with a price he always collected. He had not, in years, been asked for garbage. "What I'm about to throw away," he repeated. "The food," she said. "From your table. They box it up sometimes. If you're not going to eat it." She swallowed. "Please." There it was again. That word, please. Not whining, not performing, just a fact she was placing in front of him. He studied her, and here is where the night turned, because Adrian Volkov had spent 20 years staying alive by noticing what other men missed, and he noticed something now. The girl was hungry. That much was obvious in the hollow of her cheeks, but she did not ask the way a hungry person asks. A starving child reaches. A starving child cannot keep the want out of their hands. This girl kept her hands at her sides, fingers wrapped tight around the strap of a small, worn bag slung across her body, and her eyes kept flicking down to it, then up the street, then back to him, the way a person checks a clock they are afraid of. She was not afraid for herself. She was in a hurry to get back to something. "What's in the bag?" he said. Not a question, a test. Her hand closed over it. "Nothing. Just my stuff." She was lying, and she was bad at it, and somehow that was the thing that held him there. "Come inside," he said. "Sit down. Order whatever you want. It's nothing to me." End. No. Fast. Almost before he finished. "Thank you. I can't. I just need the food. The leftovers. That's all. I'll have my driver give you money. Enough for a week of meals. You don't have to do anything for it." For 1 second, something crossed her face. Hope, maybe. Then she shut it down, the way you close a door against the cold. "No money," she said. "Please don't. Just the food, if you're throwing it out anyway." And now Adrian was no longer thinking about the food at all. Money. A child like this would take. Money solved everything for a child like this. A warm room, a hot meal, an escape, Unless money was the one thing she could not be seen with. Unless money raised questions. Unless there was someone, somewhere, that she could not afford to explain herself to. He looked at the bag again. Small, light. He had assumed it held her belongings. Now he was not sure. It looked like the kind of bag you carry medicine in. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Junie." "Junie." He let it sit. "Where are your parents?" "Junie." The smallest flicker. Around. Another lie. He had built an empire reading lies. This one was thin as paper. He turned to the valet. "The boxes from my table. Bring them out." The valet went. Junie's shoulders dropped half an inch with relief, and that half inch told him more than anything she had said. This food was not for her. Or, not only for her. Someone was waiting, and that someone was the reason she stood here in the cold asking a stranger for scraps, instead of taking the money that would have changed her life. The valet came back with 2 paper bags, heavy and warm, the smell of butter and roasted chicken rising off them. Junie reached out and took them with both arms, holding them against her chest like something breakable. "Thank you," she said, and she meant it so completely that it almost hurt to hear. "Thank you, sir. God bless you." And then she turned and walked away, quickly, into the dark beyond the restaurant's light. Adrian stood there a moment. His driver opened the car door. "Sir?" Adrian watched the small figure moving down the wet sidewalk, the too big jacket, the bags hugged tight. "Wait here," he said. "Don't follow in the car." And then Adrian Volkov, a man feared across half a city, a man who had not chased anyone in 15 years, turned up his collar against the wind, and went on foot after a 14-year-old girl carrying a bag of leftovers into the dark. He did not know yet what he would find. He only knew, with the certainty that had kept him alive this long, that something was very wrong, and that for the first time in a long time, he could not make himself look away. She moved like she knew she was being followed even when she wasn't. Adrian kept a half-block back, in the shadows of the awnings, the way old habits taught him. Junie cut down side streets, doubled once around a parked truck, glanced over her shoulder twice. Smart. Trained, almost. Not by anyone kind. A child learned to move like that, only when staying invisible, was the difference between safe and not. The good streets ended. The restaurants and the doormen gave way to shuttered storefronts, then to a stretch of the old industrial district that the city had been promising to redevelop for a decade. Chain-link fences, buildings with their windows gone. A factory that had made radio parts before Adrian was born, its name still ghosted in pale letters above a loading dock. Junie slipped through a gap in the fence she clearly knew, ducked along the side of the factory, and disappeared through a door that hung off one hinge. Adrian stopped at the fence, looked up at the dead building. 5 stories of broken glass and rust. No power, no heat. The temperature was dropping toward freezing, and a child had just carried a bag of food into that. He could have left. He told himself, even then, that the smart thing was to leave. Whatever this was, it was not his. He had survived this long by keeping other people's tragedies on the far side of a wall. He went through the fence. Inside, the factory was a cathedral of shadow. His footsteps echoed off concrete. Somewhere above, water dripped. He followed a faint smell of smoke and the fainter glow of light, up a frozen stairwell, his hand never far from the weight inside his coat. Old instinct. He did not expect to need it. He kept it ready anyway. On the 3rd floor, in what had once been an office, he found the light. It came from a camping lantern, the cheap kind from a hardware store, set on an overturned crate. The room had been made into something almost like a home, a nest of blankets in the corner. Cardboard taped over the broken window to keep the wind out. A few books stacked neatly. A child's careful attempt to build a world out of nothing. And on a mattress on the floor, under every blanket the room had, lay a woman. She was young, somewhere in her 20s, though sickness had aged her. Her face was pale and damp with fever. Her eyes were half open and unfocused, drifting, not seeing the room. One of her arms lay outside the blankets, and even from the doorway Adrian could see the yellowing remains of bruises that had nothing to do with illness. Someone had hurt this woman, badly, weeks ago, and no one had treated it. Junie was kneeling beside her, the food spread out on a clean cloth, breaking the chicken into small pieces. "I got us something good tonight," the girl was saying, soft, almost cheerful, the way you talk to someone you are trying to keep alive with your voice alone. "It's from a fancy place. You always said you wanted to try a fancy place. Here, just a little. You have to eat a little." The woman's lips moved. No sound came out. "I know," Junie whispered. "I know you're tired. Just 3 bites. For me, please." Adrian stood in the dark of the doorway and felt something move in his chest that he had spent 15 years making sure would never move again. He had walked into many rooms in his life. Rooms where men begged. Rooms where deals were made that ended other men's lives. He had stood over things most people would never recover from seeing, and he had felt nothing, because feeling nothing was the price of the life he had chosen. He felt something now. A board creaked under his foot. Junie spun, and in a single motion, she was on her feet, and between him and the sick woman, a short kitchen knife in her hand, held low, the way someone holds a knife when they have actually had to use one. "Get out," she said. Her voice did not shake. "That was the worst part. I don't have anything. Get out or I'll hurt you. I will." Adrian did not move toward her. He raised both hands, slowly, showing them empty, and crouched down where he stood, so that he was no longer looming over her, so that his eyes were closer to level with hers. "My name is Adrian," he said quietly. "I gave you the food, outside the restaurant. Do you remember?" Recognition flickered across her face, and with it, a fear far worse than the fear of a stranger. The fear of a stranger who had seen too much. "You followed me," she breathed. "Why did you follow me? You can't tell anyone. You can't. Please, mister, please, they'll take her. They'll take her away, and they'll send me back, and she'll die. She'll die without me. Please." The knife was still up, but her arm had started to shake now, and her eyes had filled. "Nobody is taking anyone tonight," Adrian said. "Look at me. Nobody is taking anyone." He looked at the woman on the mattress, then back at the girl, who could not have weighed 100 pounds, and was guarding her with a kitchen knife in a freezing factory. "How long?" he asked. "Have you been doing this alone?" Junie's mouth trembled. "Since the summer," she said. And the knife lowered, just slightly, and the first tear fell, and Adrian Volkov understood that he was not going to be able to walk away from this. Not tonight. Not ever. He did not push. He had interrogated hard men into confessions, and he knew that the fastest way to lose a frightened person was to chase them. So he sat down on the cold floor of that ruined office, his expensive coat against the filth, and he waited. Little by little, in pieces, between checks on the sleeping woman, the story came out. Junie's mother had died when she was 9. Her father she had never known. There had been a series of placements after that, foster homes that ranged from indifferent to cruel. The last one, a man named Garrett who collected the checks and spent them on himself, was where the older bruises came from. In June, after a night Junie would not describe in detail, she had climbed out a window and not gone back. "I'm good at being gone," she said simply. "Nobody really looks for the ones like me. There's too many of us." She had survived the summer on the edges of the city, odd jobs from people who did not ask a runaway's age, cans and bottles, the kindness of a few, the cruelty of more, and then, in August, she had found the woman. "It was an alley off Kerrigan Street," Junie said, staring at the lantern. "Behind the laundromat, there was a man. He was hitting her. Really hitting her, not like a slap, like he wanted her gone, and nobody stopped. People walked past. A guy looked right at it and walked past, her jaw set. I threw a bottle at his head. I don't know why. I just did. And he chased me. But I'm fast, and I know the buildings, and I lost him. And when I came back, she was just lying there. Everyone had walked past her." "You could have called for help," Adrian said gently. "An ambulance." "They ask questions," Junie said. "Ambulances bring police. Police bring caseworkers. Caseworkers send me back and put her wherever they put people like her. And that man, whoever he is, he knew her. He wasn't a stranger. He'd find her again." She shook her head. "I couldn't. So I got her up. She could barely walk. I got her here. and I've been taking care of her since. Adrian looked at the woman. Does she have a name? She doesn't remember it. Junie's voice cracked for the first time. She got hit in the head. At first, she could talk a little. She said her name might be Claire, or it started with a C. She wasn't sure. She remembers pieces, a yellow kitchen, a song, a man's voice she's afraid of, but not who she is. Not where she's from. She thinks she's alone in the world. She told me once she was glad I found her because at least if she dies, somebody will know she was here. The girl wiped her face roughly with her sleeve. So I decided somebody was going to know. Somebody was going to make sure she didn't die in an alley like she didn't matter. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The lantern hissed. The wind pressed against the cardboard window. Adrian had spent his life around the question of what people are worth. He bought and sold leverage. He knew, to the dollar, what a man would pay to protect what he loved and what he would sacrifice to save himself. He had grown certain, somewhere along the way, that everyone, underneath, was a transaction. And here was a 14-year-old with a bruised face who had thrown a bottle at a violent man for a stranger, and then given up her own chance at safety every single day for 3 months. To keep that stranger alive, for nothing, for no return, because she had decided the woman mattered, and that was the whole of it. He thought of someone else, then. He always tried not to. A different woman, a long time ago, in a different city, who had needed him to come, and who had waited, and who he had reached too late. He had built everything he was around the wall he put up after that. Around never being too late again, by never letting anyone close enough to need him. She needs a doctor, he said, and his voice was rougher than he intended. Tonight, she has an infection, probably more than one, and a head injury that's gone untreated for months. If she doesn't get care, she will die, Junie. Soon. You know that. That's why you're afraid. If a doctor sees her, they will not call anyone, Adrian said, because the doctor will work for me, in a place that does not exist on any list, and no one will ask a single question. Not about her. Not about you. He leaned forward. Do you understand what I am telling you? I can make this happen tonight. The right people. The best people. No police. No caseworkers. No man from any alley. I can do this. The only thing I need is for you to let me. Junie looked at him with the oldest eyes he had ever seen in a child's face. She was weighing him, deciding whether he was one more adult who would take what mattered to her and call it help. Why? She said. Why would you do that? You don't know us. People don't do things for free. There's always a reason. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to him in years, and it deserved an honest answer. Because a long time ago, Adrian said, I was too late for someone, and I have spent every day since making sure I never needed anyone again, so I would never have to feel that. He looked at the dying woman and at the child who had refused to walk past her. You did the thing I was too much of a coward to do. You stayed. So, no, there's no price. Let me be on the right side of it, just this once. The factory was silent. Then Junie, 14 years old, guardian of a nameless woman in a dead building, stepped aside from the mattress. Okay, she whispered. Help her. Please help her. Adrian took out his phone. They came within the hour, and they came quietly. 2 men carried a stretcher up the frozen stairwell with the unhurried competence of people who had done difficult things in difficult places and learned not to make noise about it. A doctor followed, a woman in her 50s, with steady hands and no questions, who knelt by the mattress and went to work before her coat was even off. Junie would not leave the woman's side, so Adrian did not make her. She rode in the back of the unmarked vehicle holding the sick woman's hand, and Adrian sat across from them, and no one spoke. The place they went to was on the top floor of a building Adrian owned through 4 other names. It had been many things. Tonight it was a hospital room, white and warm and bright, with a real bed and machines that beeped in steady, reassuring rhythm. The woman was given fluids, antibiotics, a scan of the head injury that had stolen her name. Junie watched all of it from a chair in the corner, refusing food, refusing sleep, her eyes never leaving the bed. Toward dawn, the doctor took Adrian into the hall. She would have been dead inside a week, the doctor said flatly. Maybe less. Sepsis. The girl kept her alive on nothing but will and chicken broth, frankly. I don't know how. She glanced back through the window. The head injury is the concerning part. There's old swelling. The memory loss is real, not faked. With time and care, some of it may come back, or none of it. I can't promise. The bruising, Adrian said. When you treated it, was it consistent with what the girl described? A beating? The doctor's face hardened. It was consistent with months of them. That woman has old fractures that healed wrong. Whoever this was, it wasn't one night in an alley. Someone hurt her for a long time before that alley. She paused. If you want my honest red, she didn't lose her memory from one assault. The mind sometimes throws away what it can't survive remembering. That woman didn't just forget who she is. Some part of her decided not to know. Adrian was quiet. He had come into the night thinking he had stumbled onto a runaway and a stranger. He understood now that he had stumbled onto the edge of something with a history, something with a man at the center of it, a man who had hurt a woman for a long time and then, in an alley, tried to finish it. A man who, somewhere in the city, was almost certainly wondering where his victim had gone. A man, in other words, with a reason to want her never found. I want to know who she is, Adrian said, quietly. I want to know who's looking for her, and I want to know who isn't, because the second list matters more. That's not really medicine, the doctor said. No, Adrian agreed. It isn't. He went back into the room. Junie had finally fallen asleep in the corner chair. Exhaustion winning the war her fear had been fighting for months. Someone had put a blanket over her. Her hand had fallen open in sleep, and even unconscious, her fingers were curved as if still holding something. Adrian looked at the woman in the bed, breathing easier now, and at the girl in the chair who had carried her here, on nothing but stubbornness and love. Then he made some calls. Not to doctors this time. He had spent 20 years learning how to find people who did not want to be found, and how to find the men who made them disappear. He had told himself he was done with all of it. He had been wrong. It took his people 4 days to put a name to her face. They worked carefully, the way Adrian's people always worked, with photographs run through channels that did not officially exist and a network of debts and favors built over 2 decades. They did not go to the police. They went around them, underneath them, into the places where a person's history actually lives. Her name was Cassandra Hale. She was 27 years old. 3 years ago, she had been an elementary school art teacher in a quiet suburb 200 miles south, well-liked, unremarkable, with a small apartment and a watercolor habit, and a boyfriend she had met at a friend's wedding. The boyfriend's name was Roland Price. And here, the story turned cold. Because Roland Price was not a small man. He was a real estate developer with political friends, a face that appeared in the society pages and the business sections, a man who had cut ribbons beside the mayor. He had a charity foundation with his name on it. He had a wife he had married 18 months ago, in a ceremony, covered by 3 magazines. Cassandra Hale had vanished from her life 14 months earlier. There had been a missing persons report, filed by a sister. There had been a brief flurry of attention, and then, very quickly, the case had gone quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that money buys. The official theory, the one that had been gently encouraged into the record, was that Cassandra had a history of instability, that she had left of her own accord, that she did not wish to be found. None of it was true. Adrian knew the shape of a manufactured story when he saw one. He had manufactured enough of them himself. What had actually happened, his people pieced together, was this. Cassandra had moved in with Roland Price. The charm had lasted a few months. Then, it had become control, and the control had become violence, and the violence had escalated the way it always does. By the time she understood what he was, he had isolated her completely. Her sister's calls had been intercepted. Her friends had been driven off. When she finally tried to leave, 14 months ago, Roland Price had not let her become an ex-girlfriend who could talk. He had made her into a missing person instead. She had not stayed missing because she ran. She had stayed missing because, somewhere in those 14 months, he had moved her, hidden her, broken her down to a thing that could be kept. And then, this past August, something had gone wrong. And he had decided she was a loose end, and a loose end gets taken to an alley. He had not counted on a 14-year-old with a bottle. Adrian read the file twice. Then he sat for a long time in the dark of his office, looking out at the city, and he understood the full shape of what he was holding. A powerful man had spent a year erasing a woman. He was good at it. He had police he could call, and reporters he could feed, and a clean, public face. And the only two people in the world who knew the truth, who could undo all of it, were a brain-injured woman who could not remember her own name, and a runaway child that the system had already decided did not matter. Two people no one would believe. Two people no one was looking for. Two people Roland Price could make disappear a second time, and no one would ever ask why. Except that now there was a third person who knew, and the third person was Adrian Volkov. He did not tell Junie everything at once. He told her the woman's name. He watched the girl say it under her breath. Cassandra, Cassandra, trying it out, as if she could give it back by repeating it enough. He told her that Cassandra had been a teacher, that she had painted, that she had a sister who had filed a report and never stopped looking, whatever the official record claimed. He watched something ease in Junie's face at that. The knowledge that the woman she had decided mattered had, in fact, mattered to someone all along. He did not, yet, tell her the name, Roland Price. He did not tell her about the man's reach, his lawyers, his political friends. He did not tell her that the same man who had been hitting Cassandra in that alley could buy and sell most of the people Adrian could threaten. Some weight a child should not have to carry until it is time. Cassandra healed slowly. The infection cleared. The fever broke. She began to sit up, then to eat on her own, then to walk the length of the room and back with Junie hovering at her elbow like an anxious parent. Her memory came in fragments, unpredictable. A smell would open a door. The taste of orange would make her cry without knowing why. One afternoon she looked at a child's drawing Junie had made and said, with sudden certainty, "I used to teach them to mix colors. You always tell the little ones, you can't get to brown by being careful. You have to be brave and mix everything." Then the certainty was gone, and she did not know where the words had come from. But the man's voice still lived in her. When a door slammed, she flinched to the floor. When a male nurse raised his voice on the phone in the hall, she went white and silent and shaking, and only Junie could bring her back, kneeling in front of her, holding her face, saying, "You're safe. You're safe. He's not here. I've got you." The way the girl had clearly said it 100 times in a freezing factory with no one else in the world to help her. Watching them, Adrian made a decision that surprised him. He could have handled it the way he handled everything, quietly, permanently. He knew men who solved problems like Roland Price, in ways that left no record and no second chances. It would have been easy. It would have been, in its way, just. But he watched Cassandra learn to walk again with a child's hand under her arm, and he understood that the old way would not actually give either of them what they needed. A man who vanished could not be exposed. A man who simply died would leave Cassandra a missing person forever, her sister still searching, her record still showing her as unstable and gone by choice. The lie would outlive him. And Junie, who had thrown a bottle at violence and demanded that someone matter, did not need another secret buried in the dark. She needed the world to be made to see. Cassandra did not need Roland Price dead. She needed to exist again. She needed her name back, in the light, on the record, where no amount of money could unwrite it. That was harder than killing him. Adrian had spent his life learning that the things worth doing usually were. "I'm going to give her back her life," he told Junie one evening, the two of them in the hall while Cassandra slept. Not in the shadows, in the open. Her name cleared. Her sister found. And the man who did this exposed in a way he can't pay his way out of. He paused. "It will take longer. It's more dangerous. He has people. When he realizes she's alive, he will come looking, and he will not come gently. I won't lie to you about that, but it's the only way she gets to be a person again, instead of a secret." Junie was quiet. Then she said, "She'd want that, even if it's scary. She told me once she'd rather be afraid and real then safe and gone. She looked up at him. What do you need me to do? Stay close to her. Keep doing exactly what you've been doing. You're the only one who can reach her when she falls. He almost smiled. You've been protecting her for 3 months with a kitchen knife. I'm just going to give you better tools. For the first time since he had met her, Junie laughed. It was small and startled, like she had forgotten she could. It would be the last easy moment for a while. Because 200 miles away, in a glass office above a city, Roland Price was about to learn that the loose end he thought he had cut had a thread still running, and that the thread led, impossibly, to the one man in the state he should have been afraid of. The way Price found out was through his own carelessness, which is how powerful men usually undo themselves. Adrian's people had been asking quiet questions, and quiet questions, asked in the right places, create ripples. One of Price's paid contacts in a records office noticed an inquiry into a closed missing persons case, and, hoping to earn a bonus, mentioned it to his patron. Roland Price, who had spent 14 months certain that Cassandra Hale was a buried problem, suddenly learned that someone with resources was digging her up. He did what such men do. He panicked, and then he reached for force. It started small. One of Adrian's people noticed a car that did not belong, parked too long across from the building where Cassandra was recovering. Then a man asking the wrong questions at a coffee shop nearby. Price had hired investigators, and behind the investigators, the kind of men investigators turn into when the money is good and the questions stop. He did not yet know who he was up against. He only knew that his erased woman was somewhere in this city, alive, and that he had to finish the job before she could speak. Adrian moved Cassandra and Junie that same night to a safer place, a quiet house outside the city with a high wall, and people he trusted at the gate. He did it calmly, without frightening them more than necessary. But he knew the calm would not last, because he had decided not to simply hide them. Hiding was temporary. He was building something, and to build it, he needed Price to keep reaching, to keep making mistakes, to keep leaving the trail of a guilty man. He needed 2 things, and he set out to get them both. The first was Cassandra's sister. Her name was Mara Hale, and she had spent 14 months refusing to believe the story that her sister had walked away. She had hounded the police until they stopped taking her calls. She had spent her savings on a private investigator who had found nothing. She had nearly given up when Adrian's people reached her, carefully, and told her that her sister was alive. She did not scream or weep. She went very still and said, "Where?" in a voice that had been waiting 14 months to ask that single word. The reunion was not a clean, bright thing. Cassandra did not remember her sister's face. She looked at Mara with the polite confusion of meeting a stranger, and Mara had to sit across from her and not fall apart, had to be gentle, had to say, "My name is Mara. I'm your sister. You don't have to remember me yet. I'll remember enough for both of us." But when Mara took out an old photograph, the 2 of them as girls in a yellow kitchen, Cassandra's hand began to shake, and she whispered, "I know that kitchen. I've been dreaming about that kitchen." And it was a beginning. The second thing Adrian needed was proof. Not the kind that vanishes in a court that money has reached, the kind that cannot be buried, because too many people are already looking at it. For that, he was patient. He let Price keep reaching, and every time Price's men made a move, Adrian's people were already there, watching, recording, documenting. A photograph of a hired man outside the wrong building. A wire transfer traced through accounts Price thought were clean. A phone call, captured, in which a panicked Roland Price said something to a subordinate that no innocent man would ever say. He was building a case, not for himself, for the daylight. But cases take time, and frightened, powerful men do not wait. It happened on a gray afternoon, 6 weeks in. Cassandra had been getting stronger. More of her had been coming back, in pieces, and with the memory came a fragile, growing fury, the particular anger of a person who is beginning to understand exactly what was done to them. She had started to say his name, Roland. She would say it, and then go cold and quiet, and Junie would sit with her until the cold passed. Junie had walked to the end of the long driveway that afternoon to bring in a package. Just inside the wall, just for a minute. The kind of small, ordinary thing a person stops being afraid to do after 6 weeks of safety. The van came fast. 2 men. They had been watching the house longer than Adrian's people realized, and they had decided the girl was the way in, the lever, the thing you take to make the others come out. One of them had Junie halfway off her feet, a hand over her mouth, when she did the thing she had been doing her whole life. She did not freeze. She fought. She bit down hard enough to draw blood and drove her heel into a knee and screamed. Not in fear, but in fury, loud enough to carry over the wall. It bought 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough. Adrian's people were trained, and they were close, and they came over that wall before the second man got the van door open. What happened next was brief and ugly and professional. When it was over, one of the 2 men was on the ground, and the other was running, and Junie was sitting against the wall with a split lip and wild eyes, shaking, but free, and unhurt in any way that wouldn't heal. Adrian reached her a moment later. He crouched down in front of her, the way he had that first night in the factory, hands open, voice level. "I've got you," he said. "You're safe. He's not here. I've got you." They were her own words, given back to her. Junie looked at him, and the terror cracked, and she did something she had not done once in all the weeks he had known her. She let herself be a child. She leaned forward and pressed her face into his shoulder and cried, the deep, exhausted crying of someone who has been strong for far too long, and has finally, for one moment, been allowed to stop. Adrian held on and did not say anything, because there was nothing to say, and because he was learning that sometimes the most you can do for a person is simply not let go. But over the top of Junie's head, looking at nothing, his face had changed. The warmth was gone. What was left was the thing his enemies had spent 20 years being afraid of. Roland Price had reached for the child. That was the line. Adrian had been content to be patient, to build his case in the daylight, to do the harder and better thing. He was still going to do the harder and better thing. But Price had just taught him that the man would not stop, that every day Cassandra and Junie were not safe was a day Price might try again, and that patience had a cost measured in this girl's blood. So Adrian decided to do both. He would still hand the man to the daylight, intact and exposed, his crimes proven in a way no money could erase. But he would accelerate, and he would make certain that between now and then, Roland Price never had a free moment to reach for anyone again. It was time to stop letting Price make the moves. Adrian did not have him hurt. That was the part that would have surprised the men who feared him most. Instead, he reached out, through 3 intermediaries, and arranged a meeting. Roland Price came because his curiosity and his arrogance were larger than his caution. He came because he had finally learned the name of the man who had been blocking him, and the name had frightened him enough that he wanted to look across a table at it and convince himself it could be reasoned with. They met in a private room of a restaurant, not unlike the one where the story began. 2 powerful men, one in an expensive suit and one in dark gray, with the city's lights below. Price tried, at first, to be charming. Then, when charm slid off Adrian like water off glass, he tried to be reasonable. He spoke in the careful language of men who never quite say the thing. He suggested that there had been a misunderstanding. He suggested that the woman in question was unwell, unreliable, that her account of events could not be trusted, that her own family had documented her instability. He suggested, delicately, that a man of Adrian's resources surely understood that some problems were better made to go quietly away, and that he, Price, was prepared to be very generous to a partner in that arrangement. Adrian let him talk. He had learned long ago that a guilty man, given enough silence, will fill it with rope. When Price was finished, Adrian spoke for the first time in several minutes. "Her name is Cassandra Hale," he said. "She was an art teacher. She painted with watercolors. She taught children that you can't get to brown by being careful." He watched the words land. "She is not unwell. She is not unreliable. She is a woman you spent a year breaking, and then tried to throw away in an alley off Kerrigan Street this past August. A child stopped you. A child you tried to put in a van 6 days ago." He leaned forward, very slightly. "You should not have reached for the child, Roland. The color went out of Price's face. "I don't know what you think you have," Price said, but his voice had changed. "I have everything," Adrian said simply. "I have the medical records of every injury, documented and dated. I have her sister, who never stopped looking, and who will stand up in any room you can name. I have your men, the ones you sent, the ones who will talk the moment talking becomes the thing that saves them. I have the transfers. I have the call you made on the 14th. I have Cassandra herself, getting stronger every day, remembering more every week." He paused. "And I have something you have never had to deal with in your life, Roland, because you have always been the most powerful man in the room. You have me. And I am not a court you can buy or a reporter you can feed. I am simply going to make sure that all of it, every piece, lands in the daylight at the same time, in front of too many people, for you to reach all of them." Price was silent for a long moment. "What do you want?" he finally said. The arrogance was gone. What was left was a frightened man. "I want nothing from you," Adrian said. "That's what you've never understood about people like the ones you hurt. There's nothing to negotiate. You're not going to vanish, the way you made her vanish. That would be a mercy, and it would let you keep your name clean. You're going to stay exactly where you are, in the open, while the truth comes out around you, piece by piece. Until there is nothing left of the man in the society pages, but the man who did this." He stood and buttoned his coat. "You spent a year making sure no one would believe her. I've spent 6 weeks making sure everyone will. Goodbye, Roland." He left Price sitting alone at the table, a powerful man for the last time. It did not happen all at once, because that is not how the daylight works. But it happened. The proof Adrian had gathered did not go to a single police officer who could be bought, or a single reporter who could be silenced. It went everywhere at once. It went to Mara Hale's lawyer, and to a federal office 2 states away that had no loyalty to Roland Price, and to 3 different journalists who had never met one another. Each handed a piece that confirmed the others. It went into the open in so many directions on the same morning that there was no hand large enough to cover all of it. Roland Price's careful world came apart with the particular speed of a lie that has been holding back a great deal of truth. The wife left within the week. The political friends discovered they had urgent business elsewhere. The charity removed his name from the building. And then came the indictment, and the trial, and the slow, public, permanent unmaking of a man who had believed he was untouchable. Cassandra testified. By then she had recovered enough to do it, though not all of her memory ever came back, and it cost her more than anyone watching could know. She sat in the witness chair, small and steady, and she told the truth in her own halting words, and when the defense lawyer tried to suggest she was unreliable, that she could not even remember her own life, she looked at him and said, "I remember enough. I remember being afraid of a slamming door for a year. You don't forget that, even when you forget everything else." And the room was very quiet. Junie was there too, every day, sitting beside Mara, watching the woman she had carried out of an alley reclaim her own name in front of the world. Roland Price went to prison, not for a year, for the rest of any life that mattered. And Cassandra Hale, who had been a missing person, who had been a secret, who had been a thing kept in the dark and then thrown away, became, again, a person. Her name was in the record now, in the light, where no amount of money could ever unwrite it. Spring came to the city the way it always does, late and sudden, the wind off the rivers finally turning soft. There was a house now, a real one, with a yellow kitchen, because when Cassandra had been well enough to choose, that was the one thing she had known for certain that she wanted. Mara had moved nearby. And Junie lived there, with paperwork that had been arranged through channels both legal and quiet, made a daughter of the household in every way that mattered, though Cassandra never once tried to be her mother. They were something the language does not quite have a word for. 2 people who had each saved the other's life, learning, slowly, how to do the much harder thing of building one. Cassandra painted again. Her hands had remembered that even when her mind had not. The walls of the yellow kitchen filled up with watercolors, and one of them, the one she kept by the door, was of a small figure in a too-big jacket, standing at the edge of a restaurant's light. Just outside its warm reach, though she had never seen that moment, and Junie had never described it. She had simply known, the way she knew the kitchen, that it belonged on the wall. Adrian came by sometimes. Not often. He was not a man built for soft rooms, and they all understood that, and it was all right. He would sit at the yellow table and drink coffee he did not finish, and listen to Junie talk about school, which she had started, and was fiercely, ferociously good at, the way a person is good at the thing they were never allowed to want. On one of those visits, near the end, Junie walked him out to his car, the same black car, the same driver. The girl was taller now, fed. There was no bruise on her jaw. Her eyes were still the oldest thing about her, but they had something in them now that had not been there in the factory. They had a future in them. "Can I ask you something?" she said, at the car door. "That first night, outside the restaurant, why did you follow me? You could have just given me the food and gone home. Why'd you come after me?" Adrian thought about it. He thought about the wall he had spent 15 years building, and the woman he had once been too late for, and the way the whole shape of his life had been one long argument that no one was worth the risk of needing. "Because you asked me for garbage," he said, "when I'd have given you the world. And I had to know what kind of person does that." He looked at her, this child who had thrown a bottle at violence and demanded that someone matter. "Now I know. The strongest people in the world are the ones nobody ever sees. You were carrying her through the dark, and no one was watching, and you did it anyway. I spent my whole life thinking strength was being feared." He almost smiled. "You showed me it was just refusing to put someone down." Junie looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she had never done. She stepped forward and hugged him, quick and fierce, the way she did everything. "Thank you," she said, "for being on the right side of it." "That was always you," Adrian said. "I just held the light." He got in the car. Junie stepped back onto the curb and lifted one hand. As the car pulled away, Adrian looked back, once through the rear window at the girl on the sidewalk in front of the house, with the yellow kitchen, no longer carrying anything, no longer in a hurry to get back to the dark, simply standing in the spring afternoon, with the whole open day in front of her. She had stopped surviving. She had finally started to live, and somewhere in the city, a man who had spent his life certain that everyone was a transaction drove home through the soft spring light, having learned, far too late and just in time, that the most valuable thing he had ever found had asked him only for the food he was going to throw away.